Engaging with China, a rational approach for global stability. In today's geopolitical landscape, the growing tension between China and Western nations, particularly the United States, reflects deep-seated fears of shifting global power dynamics. Rather than turning China into an adversary, the world, especially the Anglo-Saxon nations, should engage with China through diplomacy and trade. This approach would not only promote global stability but also acknowledge the interconnectedness of modern economies. China's rise is not a threat born of hostility but a natural consequence of its rapid development and competitive advantage. The West, particularly the United States, must come to terms with the fact that their waning dominance is largely a result of internal choices, not Chinese aggression. This essay will explore how the West has benefited from China's economic rise, the failure of sanctions as a policy tool, and the hypocrisy of political elites who profit from the very system they condemn. The West's economic dependence on China. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, China's emergence as a global manufacturing hub was welcomed by the West. Major corporations such as Apple, Microsoft, and Tesla seized the opportunity to outsource production to China, benefiting from its lower labor costs, efficiency, and infrastructure. As a result, Western consumers enjoyed access to affordable goods, from smartphones to electric vehicles, that were produced at a fraction of the cost it would take to manufacture them in the United States or Europe. For instance, Apple's iPhone, one of the most iconic technological products of the 21st century, owes its affordability and widespread availability in part to China's manufacturing capabilities. Foxconn, the Taiwanese company that assembles iPhones, operates its largest factory in China, employing hundreds of thousands of workers. Apple's reliance on Chinese labor allows it to keep prices competitive while maintaining high profit margins. Without China's efficient production infrastructure, it's doubtful that Apple could have achieved its dominance in the global smartphone market. The same pattern can be observed with Tesla, whose gigafactory in Shanghai has become a cornerstone of the company's success. China's openness to foreign investment, combined with its skilled workforce and supportive regulatory environment, allowed Tesla to scale production quickly and meet global demand for electric vehicles. The U.S. benefits from this relationship as it enjoys cheaper and faster access to these goods, while Chinese labor and expertise fuel the innovation needed for such cutting-edge technologies. Sanctions, an ineffective tool against economic competitors. Despite this mutually beneficial relationship, recent years have seen the U.S. and other Western countries imposing sanctions and trade barriers on China, ostensibly to counter China's growing influence. These sanctions, however, have historically proven to be ineffective, especially when used as a tool to suppress economic competition. The sanctions imposed on China primarily aim to limit access to advanced technologies, such as semiconductors and 5G infrastructure, yet they fail to account for the fact that China is rapidly developing its own technological base. Instead of slowing China's rise, these sanctions often push the country to innovate domestically, reducing its reliance on Western technologies in the long term. Furthermore, sanctions tend to harm consumers and businesses on both sides. For example, the U.S. ban on Huawei, a leading Chinese telecommunications company, did little to stifle China's technological advancement, but instead forced American tech companies to lose a major business partner. The result is a situation where U.S. firms are cut off from a lucrative market, while China accelerates its development of alternative technologies. This isolationist approach only undermines the global economy and stokes tensions unnecessarily. The hypocrisy of Western elites. Perhaps the most glaring issue in the West's antagonistic stance toward China is the hypocrisy of the political and economic elites. Many of the same individuals and institutions that criticize China's rise are deeply intertwined with its economic success. U.S. lawmakers, for example, often speak out against China's influence while personally benefiting from investments in Chinese companies or receiving donations from corporations that profit from Chinese trade. A notable example is how many members of Congress have financial ties to companies with substantial operations in China, whether through stock investments, campaign contributions, or personal business ventures. These ties raise serious questions about the integrity of the West's hardline stance. It's a paradox where political leaders publicly condemn China while privately profiting from its economic boom. The same corporations that benefit from low-cost Chinese manufacturing also lobby aggressively against any policies that might disrupt their access to Chinese markets. This kind of hypocrisy reveals that the root of the issue is not China's rise, but the fear of losing control over the global economy. The way forward: cooperation over conflict. Rather than continuing down a path of conflict and isolation, the West should recognize that engagement with China offers far more benefits than turning it into an enemy. A collaborative approach that focuses on trade, diplomacy, and mutual respect will ensure a more stable global environment, where economic competition can thrive without descending into hostility. The world's most pressing challenges, climate change, global health, and cybersecurity, require cooperation between the world's largest economies. Alienating China only weakens the collective ability to address these issues. The COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated the importance of global supply chains, particularly in medical equipment and vaccine distribution, much of which relied on Chinese manufacturing. By working together rather than against each other, both the West and China can foster innovation and prosperity for their citizens. In conclusion, the fear of China's rise is rooted in the West's anxiety about losing its grip on global dominance. However, isolating China through sanctions and antagonism is a misguided approach that harms both sides. The West should instead focus on constructive engagement, recognizing that its own prosperity is deeply intertwined with China's economic success. After all, the same elites who decry China's rise are those who have profited the most from it. If the world is to move forward in a more peaceful and prosperous direction, it must reject the hypocritical and divisive narratives that pit nations against each other in favor of a more collaborative and interconnected global community.